All right, let's go ahead and get started. More folks are still coming in, but we want to be mindful of our time today. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Jimenez, Senior Wealth Advisor here at CAM Investor Solutions. Also joined by my counterpart, Sarah Contino, Senior Wealth Advisor in our Tampa office, and I'll introduce our guest speaker in just a moment. But before we begin, some housekeeping items. Throughout the presentation, you'll have a chance to ask questions in the chat, so please use the chat for any questions you have. We want to make this conversational, so there may be some questions that we covered that we received in advance too along the way, but I think you'll enjoy today's discussion. So real quickly, I want to just take a minute to kind of explain why are we here today? Why are we talking about cybersecurity? Mark and Sarah, don't you guys help with investments and financial planning and all things tax? Yes, we do that too, but a lot of what we do is about managing risk and planning for uncertainty. And that's a lot of what we do, and we discuss that all the time. And when it comes to today's topic, it applies to a lot of things, especially finances. And if you don't pay attention to it, it definitely can impact you in the way you don't want to. So today, we brought in a guest speaker to discuss this much more in depth beyond what Sarah and I can do. Part of why we do this is because, just for your information, in case those of you may not know, our industry and a lot of industries have minimum requirements when it comes to cybersecurity and safety around information of yours, ours, and others out there. Here at the firm, we're proactive in going above and beyond that. Not to pick on some of the custodians of Schwab, Fidelity, and some of the big houses, but there's minimum requirements, which we think are great, but we go above and beyond that. Some have minimum requirements for like errors of omission insurance. We go above and beyond that because until just a couple of years ago, a lot of these things weren't even required of people like us, although we've had them since day one that the firm existed. So we're proactive in understanding the risks that can happen as far as how to protect our clients or do things to help protect our clients' information and finances. And that's why we're here today. Also, many people, I think, don't assume this will happen to them. Right? We don't try to speculate and think it will or won't. We kind of assume it's going to happen to us eventually. And it's better to have a process to handling it versus not. And we're not, we're not ones that think otherwise. So why we brought in a guest speaker for this, because it is a growing concern for many. We've had questions from some of you. We've had clients, families get impacted, and it's costs, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars. In a few instances over the last year. So this is something that is not going away. It's only increasing by the day. So that's why we're here, just to give some background. But to kind of jump into it, I want to introduce our guest speaker. As you can see from the presentation, keeping your finances safe in the digital age. She could speak on this for hours, days, weeks. She's got a lot of content, a lot of experience. Paige Hanson is a cybersecurity expert and co-founder of SecureLabs. She's a digital safety expert with 2 decades of experience in identity management. As a co-founder of SecureLabs, her background has been in protecting consumers and businesses from identity theft and cyber threats. She's got a few notable professional accomplishments in helping create a national identity theft training program with the FBI, LEDA, which is the Law Enforcement Executive Development Association. Also helping educate law enforcement officials across the U.S. And she's also trained thousands of victims and advocates and military personnel through her work as well. And there's a lot of other things that I can go on. She resides in Arizona with her family and dog, Stella, which is not her password, and she'll share more on why that example is highlighted. So without further ado, please let me welcome Paige. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Mark and Sarah, for having me. As it said in your intro, this is something that a lot of times people in my years of, it's like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. So being able to provide not only the training, but then awareness is key. You have to be aware of all these different scams in order to help protect yourself. And I also encourage you to share this information, little tidbits that you learn throughout this presentation or note, things that might spark something in you, share that with others, because that's the only way that we're going to get ahead of these scammers. Now, yesterday, I will start with this. The FBI put out what this called it's called IC3, their Internet Crimes Complaint Report. And it was shocking. And everyone right now, all the news media, or if there's highlights stating that there was $16.6 billion of losses and scams from last year. This is a 33% increase. And this is, somewhat stumbling over my words because it's the biggest jump that we've seen in any report. And so the fact that this continues to happen year over year and this sort of spike, this is so much money being lost. And with just a little bit of awareness and putting some safeguards in place, you don't have to add your financial loss to this because you will not fall for these sort of scams. So it's definitely a timely conversation, and it's giving these sort of points is important. But I want to make sure that we start, yes, these scams and they've evolved. And a lot of times people think, oh, it's this cybersecurity and I don't really need to worry about that. I'm not much online, or maybe you are, so you're really focused on cybersecurity. But the whole thing about losing your identity, you're compromising your identity and your financials also starts with the low-hanging fruit, the old school methods. And so what I like to do is just talk about the evolving threat landscape, because the things that we talk about in the beginning of the presentation are still happening. My work with law enforcement, majority of their cases are these old school methods, these things that are the low-hanging fruit that fraudsters can still and continue to the types of fraud that they do, all the way to the new school. So it's important that we know the whole spectrum of the vulnerabilities. And I will note that I don't love the fear-based presentation where it's like, oh, this, and this. I will always give you a tip to help better reduce your vulnerability, because it's important that, yes, we know and are aware of the type of fraud, but what can we do about it? Because if you don't know what to do about it, then you're left scared and you don't want to use your device or something. And we want you to be able to use your device and empower you to live your life, but just also be aware of the different scams. So in my old school methods, if you've changed your address lately, it's pretty easy to do. You either go online or put something in your mailbox that you want to change your address. But mail theft is one of those. There's still task force with all of the three-letter agencies around mail theft. Believe it or not, we're still getting, and you know this because you're getting important documents through the mail. Well, the fraudsters know this and they're targeting your mail. And so I recently took a trip to Michigan in my friend's new subdivision, and I found this to be interesting. And I'm always my mind's always working from a cyber safety standpoint. And so we're on a walk, and I'm like, stop, I got to take this picture, because this row of mailboxes is super convenient. You're going to notice a theme here: convenience versus security. It's super convenient. I roll up, I can just grab my mail. But what happens? Anyone can also roll up and grab said mail. And so these sort of stations, sometimes people must say, well, I have a locked mailbox. This is example of my locked mailbox in my neighborhood. I feel pretty safe and secure because I have a handy dandy key to get into this locked mailbox. Well, my coworker, just a couple years, he sent me this. This was his neighborhood. They broke into the back of the mailbox. Why? Because it is easy to get everyone's mail then. So just because you may have the locked mailbox doesn't necessarily mean you're any less vulnerable. So one of the things I recommend is signing up for what's called USPS Informed Delivery. It's an email that comes every day, and it'll give you a screenshot of what you may expect in the mail that day. And then that way, when you pick up your mail, you're able to say, oh, yes, I did get this or I didn't get that, and flag it immediately, versus not knowing an important tax document or a check or something like that that you were expecting never made it. And so again, that's USPS Informed Delivery. There's also stickers on there now that never existed on these mailboxes saying, hey, if you notice anything, report it right away. And so those are the sort of things the USPS is trying to do to combat mail theft and stay on top of it. There's also things like your home, your purse or wallet. If you look in your purse or wallet, and I actually task you with this, is to go through your purse or wallet and look at the pieces of information that you're just carrying around. If you're carrying around your passport, your social security card, your kids' social security cards, credit cards that you don't use and haven't and don't intend to use, just things with your library card that you're not going until maybe next week, there's no reason to be carrying around extra identifying information in the event that your purse or wallet is stolen. I recently went to an event, and we're all used to, at least I am, I have a purse, and you're used to just putting it on the back of your chair, and you just have a nice time with the people that you're with, or you put it on the floor. But these are the sort of scenarios where your guard goes down, and this is when the loss of your purse or wallet happens. And so, again, this is old school methods, but these are the sort of things that we can button up in order to make sure that our purse or wallet isn't stolen. And then, if you have a recent inventory of what's happening, then you can put that, or what's in the contents of your purse or wallet, then you're able to report that accurately to either the financial institutions or the police. Also, shoulder surfing. So, shoulder surfing, I used to be a road warrior. I was on the road when I did my law enforcement training every other week. And when checking into a hotel or even being in the airport, I love doing shoulder surfing, not like in a total weird way, but I just love to listen to see what I could hear from people that are just giving out all this information. And when people would be checking into the hotel, they'd be saying what they're doing and how long they're here and all this and so on. But I never, to the extent, had the gold mine of information as I did when I recently went to a Cubs spring training game. I'm in Phoenix, so the Cubs play here for spring training. And the gentleman in front of me is on his phone, and he is buying gift cards from a website similar to eBay, but it's a different website. But in order to do that, he needed his username and password. So he scrolls to his plain text notes in his phone, not a password manager, large font, I mean, like 72 font, copy paste going back and forth. He's on the ballpark's Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi. He's going back and forth in its plain text. I can see everything. I have it blurred out intentionally that you're not seeing this. And I'm getting squirmy. My husband's like, "What's going on?" "Oh, it's that guy, isn't it? It's what he's doing." And I'm like, "Yes, I can't believe he's being so just you're kind of in your own mind or in your own world, but somebody right behind you can be looking over your shoulder. So just be aware of what's on your around you. If you're out and about, I have this screen protector for my laptop. So I do work remotely occasionally from a coffee shop. I make sure to have a screen protector. You can do the same thing when you have on your device, but more of an awareness. If you're on the phone, you're not giving your credit card number over the phone. You're not sharing intimate details about certain things. And that is going to leave not only just from a personal safety standpoint, but a cybersecurity and identity standpoint more safely. And then there's the old school method called check washing. Sometimes we still need to write checks. It's inevitable. But what fraudsters love about you writing checks is the fact that they can wash them. They use a substance, it's really hard to come by. It has acetone in it. I'm kidding. Fingernail polish remover. All they have to do is dip that check into fingernail polish remover, paint thinner, anything with acetone. And by the way, this is for educational purposes only. I'm not encouraging you to go now have a life of crime with going into your nail cabinet there, but it washes away. And so now I can, if I want, change to who the pay to the order is. I can change the amount. And so if you've ever heard of check washing or a check intercepted by mail fraud, this is the sort of organized crime that criminals are doing, is they're changing the amount, they're cashing it, and then now you're out that money. So it's very important for this is to make sure that you are checking your statements and your bank statements every month or periodically, because if something like this happened where my cousin wrote me a check for $200 and all of a sudden $2,000 was removed from her account, that's a big deal. But there's people that may notice and there's others that may not notice. And you only have 60 days to report the fraudulent activity. Outside that window, it's really hard and difficult to be reimbursed. Then there's the smishing. So, and let me also say this. In order to combat this, if you have to write a check, again, there's better ways than writing a check, but if you have to, use what's called a gel-based pen. You don't have to go fancy and buy, the anti-check washing fraud pens. These you can get in bulk on Amazon or anywhere for fairly cheap. So just use this pen. And this also applies to if you're signing important documents. Maybe you're signing buying a house or signing an important contract. Use a gel-based pen, not these just giveaway bank pens or maybe hotel pens that I also have on my desk, but gel is the way to go. And then we have smishing. I'm sure a lot of you, SMS texting. This is where you might get a text message and it's going to usually be fear-based, or it's going to make it so you need to reply. There's some urgent message or something that's going on. So I'm just going to run through some of these that you guys have gotten. Well, Wells Fargo Bank, oh my goodness, my account has been locked. Well, for me, red flag was I'm not a Wells Fargo customer. So of course that's fraud. But then even just look who that's from. Of course, we want access, instant access to our money. So the thought that we'd be locked out of our bank account could cause somebody to click on that link. The IRS is filing a lawsuit against me. Oh no, what will I do? USPS, my parcel, first of all, my parcel. We don't speak that way in the US, so that's likely a red flag there. But it's saying, oh no. And also the USPS, if you notice at the very end, they're saying, have a great day from the USPS team. Last time I checked, the USPS was also not wishing us to have a great day. Lovely people, but they're not putting that in their text. So this is all just red flags here. You've probably saw the toll scam. This has been taking over conversation this past year of these tolls. I live in Arizona. There are no tolls. My vehicle hasn't been anywhere to be told. So then you start thinking, wait, was my vehicle or my identity compromised? What is happening? And so you may click on that link, but the fraudsters know this works because it was sparking just chaos in the community and people are falling for it and they continue to do this sort of scam. But again, it is a scam. Then there's these ones that you may have gotten where you think that maybe you haven't saved a contact. How are you? Oh my goodness. Why, by the way, do not reply. Don't engage with them. I needed content for my presentation, so I did engage with them. But I rarely do, but I do recommend not engaging because then you verify to them that you are a legit person. So that's why we don't want to engage with them. So I say, who dis? I'm Anna. Don't you remember me, Mr. James? Nope. Well, then Anna sends a picture to help remind me of her. It's a beautiful woman. This may get me then to talk to her. Maybe I'm lonely. Maybe I'm looking for a companion. I'm not sure what the angle is, but they're trying it all. And so this is where, you strike up a conversation and then of course, something maybe happened to her and her family and you need to send money. You never know where it's going to go. But these are the sort of scenario that you can just stop in its tracks by just not replying. Report it junk, delete the message. And then there's this recent one where there are warnings that come out. So I received this from Mark the other day where there was a people impersonating a place where they do business with. And so they're letting people know that saying, hey, FYI, there's people impersonating us. Do not respond. And so you might also get legitimate text messages reminding you of or alerting you of certain scams that are happening out there. Which really brings us into what happens if you get a legitimate text or email for a statement link. We just looked at 5 different text messages that were scams, but there's going to be an SMS and text message is the way a lot of doctors' offices communicate for appointment reminders. I just took my car in to get the tires rotated. Do you know how I check the status of my car? Via text message and via the status activity tracker. A family member of mine had to go in the hospital. Do you know how we all kept in touch? A link that the hospital sent. So there are going to be examples of when you get legitimate text messages, which makes it so much harder for us as consumers to figure out, is this real? Is it not? So I'll give you an example. I tried to cut my finger off last year. I'm fine. I have my finger. It's all intact. Great. However, I did need to go to urgent care. And I got a statement from urgent care after I did try to cut my finger off. And for me, I didn't get an email. I got a text message. As a person that is advocating for never clicking on the link, I cannot just in good faith click on this link. That would be going against everything I'm teaching. So what do we do instead? Instead, I went to opened up a browser. I opened up the NextCare urgent care website. I logged into my account with the statement number, and then I viewed my statement. Was that super convenient? No. Did it take me maybe an extra 20 seconds? It did, but it is way more secure than just clicking on the link. You never know. Maybe the next care urgent care was compromised and that is a malicious link. Who knows? Maybe it is a legit link because it probably was. But I'm taking that extra step, opening up the browser. And that is something that you can do in order to, if you're ever wondering and just really following the philosophy of not clicking on the link. And then there's these legit, have you guys received this? So I ordered my daughter a pair of Crocs for Valentine's. Nothing says Happy Valentine's Day like a pair of pink Crocs. That's what I say. Well, there was going to be a delay in my order. And so I got this this email, and I thought it was so weird because one, it was unexpected. If something is unexpected, oftentimes it's probably a scam. I was not expecting this sort of email. And so I thought, this is probably a scam. So what did I do? Instead of saying, I still want this item, because it's not a fear-based in the sense of, but it's something that I was like, wait, I want this. I could just say, I still want this item. That's super convenient and click on that link. However, I went to my Amazon app and sure enough, there was a notification in my notification center that said the same message that they did over on the email. But I very well could have clicked on the link, but I did not. I went to my app instead, or you could open up your browser instead and then find out that notification. The same thing. And another person who does a lot of consumer education got this call, missed call from Amazon. You would assume that this would be a fake call, but it's not. It was legitimate saying that there was a delay in the order. So here, Amazon is trying to let you know, but in the age of scams, it's so hard to think, wait, is this legitimate or not? So of course my my colleague, counterpart, he didn't answer. He goes, Amazon delivery calling me. That has to be a scam. But sure enough, he went into his account and in fact it was a scam. And that's why it rolls into what's called spoofing and vishing. So, spoofing is when the fraudsters know your phone number and they also are spoofing a number that you likely are familiar with. In this case, I I spoofed the one of my former colleagues and I pretended like I was his dad. I had his dad's number. I just found it on the internet. You can find pretty much anything on the internet, which is probably another presentation. But then I called him and I spoofed him, his dad. And so we were in a meeting and I'm watching this because for educational purposes, have the app on my phone to be able to do that. I did say educational purposes, right? Okay. I spoofed it. I'm watching him in a meeting. I pretend like I'm his dad because we're talking about cybersecurity in this meeting. And I pretend, and he looks at his phone and he puts it down and he looks at it again and he's like, hold on. And he gets up to go out. And I go, Jeff, that it's me. I'm spoofing you. Anyway, proving my point in this whole meeting. But this is what's scary is our guard goes down because we think the person, our loved one, is calling us, but in fact it could be spoofed and it looks exactly like the person that is in your contacts calling you. I can't tell you, I do so much work with older adults with a nonprofit here called Resources Outreach to Safeguard the Elderly. And one thing I hear in pretty much every single presentation is somebody will say, well, I only answer calls that I know. I only answer the numbers I know or the contacts that are saved, which I think is a really good rule of thumb, but you have to be aware that spoofing can happen. And then vishing is the type of voice phishing where they are taking your voice. So we want to make sure that if somebody's calling you, you're not giving away personal identifying information because you didn't initiate the call. I can't tell you the number of times a doctor's office has called me to share test results or to share something, but they asked to verify my identity before they will talk to me. So I say, I'm not going to be providing this information. I will call you. And so I call the number I have. It takes longer. I have to be rerouted through a phone tree, but they understand because I'm not in the process of giving out personal information for a call that I did not initiate. And it's also really important to have a family phrase, a passcode, or a question before reacting. If I got a call right now that said something was going on with my family member, husband, daughter, I would react. I would say I have to leave right now and I would have to go. But if I had a family phrase or passcode or question that said, okay, what's the code or what's the word, and they weren't able to provide it, well, then I would know that it's a scam and I'm going to have to do some additional verifying before I trusted that message. We'll talk about virtual kidnapping, but you have to make sure in this case, if I got a call and it was from my husband and it says, in order to rescue him, you're going to have to pay this money. I can hang up, call back that number that's pretending to be my husband. It's going to go directly to him, and he's going to say, "What are you talking about? I'm here at work. This is not legit." So it's hard to in that scenario to think, "Oh, I'm going to hang up on this person that has the potential who might do harm to my family member," but you do have to call back that person, call back the number to verify because it's going to look like it is coming from your family member. How do you do this? I use Spoof Card, and again, for educational purposes, they promote it like they're protecting your privacy and your identity, or it's for funsies, but people do use it for the malicious and nefarious reasons. And then on top of that, there's something called spear phishing. So we've probably all heard of phishing emails. It's very similar to the text messages that you'll get that are not legitimate, but these are specifically targeting you. I am specifically targeting Mark. And I am going to say, "It's Sarah. I need this. I know that you're traveling because you've posted it on LinkedIn that you're meeting with a customer." And so they're specifically targeting you. So it's really important that if you are a business owner, that you talk to your support staff that says, "I will never ask you for gift cards. I will never ask you to do an urgent task," or we have another method of verifying other than email, because the fraudster is going to try to get you to stay on email and give away whether it's the gift card codes or the money somehow, and impersonate the CEO or maybe the higher ranking official in that company. All right, we're going to transition into QR codes. You guys have probably seen QR codes all over the place, right? So I went to a recent event and I saw about 27 QR codes just in my 1.5 hour event that I was. And I wasn't even counting all of them, from business cards to menus to there's something on the screens to giving feedback on a presentation. QR codes are everywhere. But there are QR code scams because while these legitimate QR codes make it so you go directly to the menu at a restaurant or go directly to the business card or the information of this person, there's legitimate, they can actually install malware or redirect you to a site that is not actually legitimate, like this in California. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a fake QR code posted where you would pay for parking. We're all probably very familiar of paying for parking with QR code. I know last time when I went to the Tempe Art Festival, I had to do a QR code in order to pay for my parking to even get out of the parking lot. I did not like any moment of that because I'm like, "Oh, somebody could have totally posted a fake sign." And that is exactly what they did in California on the beach. They did it on a Friday. Do you think that a lot of the banks and the financial institutions or whoever the government officials could help during the weekend? No. So this went on for a whole weekend. They made hundreds of thousands of dollars because of this scam, because it took them to a fake web page that looked like it was beach parking and they were paying for parking. And then there's also these kind of too good to be true or shock and awe. "I can't believe you cheated on me, Johnny." I put that gray box there, but "No, Johnny," and "Scan me." Well, people are curious. You're like, "Ooh, I want the tea. I want the drama. I don't have drama in my life. I want to see what's going on with Johnny." Well, instead, when you scan that, you could be going to a malicious website. Maybe they're installing malware. Maybe they are saying, "Press enter if you want to see the information or see the video," but really you're installing malware on your device. You never know, depending on really the skill set of whoever set this up, but it is super important that we don't just scan these QR codes out in the wild. If anything, just go to the website and try to find so for instance, like if you had to pay for beach parking, I would go to the beach parking or the city's website and click beach parking instead of clicking that QR code. And then there's also, speaking of QR code, it's a term called brushing. So you're probably familiar if you've ever received a gift from Amazon, you get a little slip in there and it says, click or scan here if you want to see the note or more information about your package. Well, fraudsters have taken advantage of the fact that you might be used to receiving gifts and now have it's called brushing scams where they send you an item and it could be cupcake holders all the way to a brand new appliance. I mean, it just ranges on what it might be. And you're thinking, wait, I didn't order this new pillow. Oh, but here's this sheet in here. Let me scan this and see who it's from. Well, this is actually causing you to download malware on your device or taking you to a web page that's going to require you to input personal information, but you're never going to find out who the sender is. In this scenario, you want to call Amazon or whoever the retailer is directly, give them all the information you can. Likely it's going to come up that yes, indeed, this is fraud. Keep the item, but at least you did not compromise your digital safety or your cybersecurity of your device by scanning it. I want to take a pause. We've got a lot of information to still cover, but I do want to take a pause to see what questions so far have come up and before we get to AI amplified attacks.
And you can use the chat, everybody, in the uh, webinar feature there. There's a chat. You can enter in your questions. Feel free to do it. And even along the way, we'll get to them. I do have a question, Paige. Curious your thoughts. You mentioned passwords, passphrases for a lot of the different things that can happen with some
Yes.
bad actors. We talk about sometimes clients adding passwords or phrases when they on their accounts, like at Schwab or Fidelity and elsewhere, because if somebody is impersonated or the representative that maybe is on that side of it doesn't know or is their first day, trying to help prevent money withdrawals. Do you have like a best practice for different types of phrases that they should and shouldn't use when it comes to adding these phrases? I mean, obviously easy to remember, but just things that maybe aren't as identifiable.
Yes, you should be using, and it's hard because you want to remember, right? But it shouldn't be something like your favorite color, your kids' names, your pets, and those things that you might already be posting about. It should be something that isn't connected to any of that. And in order to keep track of what, and also you can just do random, you know, black cow, ball, and just do random words versus a whole phrase. Or maybe you do a phrase, kind of what works out. But it's just how you store to remember that. And it would be to use a reputable password manager to store that, not in a contacts under Schwab and then put the passcode that you use because that is not an encrypted way to save that information. So using a password manager, which I have later, I can recommend a couple if you need a couple to remember.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, AI has been making the news for about 2 years now, and a lot of times you either have embraced it or you're afraid of it, or you might be just somewhere in the middle. AI is not necessarily bad. It is good, and there is AI for good. There is also AI where fraudsters are using it to amplify the attacks, like a scam message might have had errors or may have looked like it was written by somebody that doesn't speak, let's say, the English language. Now with the use of AI, they can use it to make it more legitimate. But AI has been used for good. There was even a case where after a dog got diagnosed with tick-borne disease, they used AI to help save the dog's life with the blood work, inputting the blood work and figuring out actually it was something else. And so there are a number of reasons why it is good. And so cool. Let's keep using it and making it more efficient in life. However, we have to use it ethically and responsibly. There was a tweet I noticed. This was last year, but it just really resonated with me. But when it comes to using it ethically and responsibly, this woman had a meeting with a company. She jumped off the meeting, but there was an AI note taker attached to this. They were using Otter AI, and the rest of the meeting, they would discuss private conversations and intimate confidential details about their business. But when they got off the meeting, it automatically, unless you change this setting, sends the notes to everybody who was on that meeting, which means this woman got, or sorry, man, got all the notes of their intimate details of the transcript and a summarization. So that is a not ethical or responsible. So we have to just make sure, if you are using these AI note takers, to make sure you know what the settings are. Maybe it only sends to people internally. Maybe you do want it to be sent to everyone, or maybe you, as the owner of the meeting, distribute the meeting notes afterwards. It's depending, but you have to realize that that sort of thing happens. With AI, also, there is the ability to do what's called deep fake images and videos. So imagine an attacker creates a video of a CEO, or you, or the president of your school, or maybe even your church pastor, saying or doing something damaging. You're going to believe it. You see the video, you see the image. But what happens is you cannot believe everything you see, because these deep fake images and the videos are getting so good. Before, there used to be a delay, that what you were saying and with your mouth, it wouldn't match up really, or it would be blurry. It has gotten so good in this past few months, that you can no longer visually tell from the things that we maybe last year would have said. There is this video of Jordan Peele using AI. There's so many examples now on YouTube, but it's showing you face to face him talking, Jordan Peele, and it looks like Barack Obama is talking. And so it's wild that it's so easy for it to look legitimate. And yeah, you just can't believe everything you see. So you have to say, verify, then trust. There is a website, and if we have time at the end, I'll go to this. But I love this website in my trainings, because can you spot the deep fake? Where you go back and forth and you say, "Wait, is that image real or not?" And you go through this whole exercise. So this would be a really good resource to not jot down, because it's a fun little exercise. But then let's get to virtual kidnapping. Oh, all these fun topics, Mark and Sarah, that we're talking about. If you like. But it is, again, awareness is, we talked about the importance of having a family phrase or passcode, but you have to make sure that to call the family member back. And I know I said it before, but just reiterating, call the family member back. If a number is spoofed, it looks like Mark is calling me and it's spoofed and it's really a fraudster. If I call Mark back on my phone, it's going to go directly to Mark. They have not invented the technology where it goes back to the fraudster unless I'm calling a specific number for a fraudster. It's going to go back to Mark. And so that is something that it's very important that you hang up and call that person back. The Federal Trade Commission is even putting out tweets like, "Hey, this is happening. You have to make sure that you enhance your family emergency protocol, especially with your nuclear unit, to make sure that you have that word and you have that phrase." Also, if you are in the position right now where you work somewhere like a bank, or somewhere where somebody is requesting money, maybe you work at a grocery store, or aware of any of these scenarios, I found it super interesting. A lot of times people are on the phone, these victims are on the phone with the fraudster, and they're saying, "Okay, now get $500 worth of gift cards." And so they're in the grocery store and they're hurrying and they're getting the $500 worth of gift cards, and then they go to check out and they're able to check out and they leave. But now more than ever, it's so important, and it's not their job, but it's a good just rule of thumb for that frontline person that's working at the bank, the grocery store checkout, to say, "Oh, I noticed you're getting a lot of gift cards. What are you doing? What are you buying them? Anything fun?" Because that question could stop a scam, because the person could say, "Oh, I owe all these taxes." Well, in the victim's mind, they're living it. It is so hard. I've been in these scenarios where it's so hard to snap somebody out of something that you think is so real, and your house is going to get repossessed, or your car, or whatever it may be, whatever the scenario is, they believe it. And so having people that put up roadblocks in this whole scenario is super important. So I loved this story where a credit union or a credit union teller, they saves a grandmother almost $10,000 because she just asked a few simple questions and ended up calling the daughter, and sure, in fact, it was a scam and saved her from withdrawing that $9,500. So think about your own life and your scenario where you might just by asking just one extra question can help save somebody. And you might be saying, how, Paige? How do they even do this? Where do you even begin? There are so many free and paid tools on the internet, legit ones that are facing on the internet. You can just find them by going to voiceai.com, or there's tools on the dark web for fraudsters or open source tools that fraudsters might use. Regardless, it is readily available. It's not like you have to be a super sophisticated in order to do it. I'm sharing this with you because it's educational. I do not encourage you to do this and for fraud. Do you like my little asterisks throughout? My little So let me pause there before we go to cyber safety best practices, because I do want to make sure that you have best practices set up that you're doing every day and you're thinking about, but I want to pause for questions that you may have.
Can you use the
Anything come
chat?
in?
Sarah, you have a question, Sarah?
Just a comment. I think, to your point about having that family password is really key. My teenage daughter actually came out the other day and said, we need to have a family password. And she was at least like educating me more. But I do see the importance of whether it's the financial part or somebody call whatever it might be, just having that kind of code word is more important than ever.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought this up because you should be discussing this in person if you can with your family
Yes.
members, because a text message is not encrypted. As much as we like to think our text messages and our communication is private, it's not unless you're using specific private apps that claim that their encryption, like Signal. If you're using just your regular text message from your telephone service provider, your provider, it's not encrypted. So having the conversation face to face is important.
Hey, Paige, related kind of to the password and extra layers of security, the AI, I've talked to people, and the deep fake and kind of replicating photos. We live in a world where there's a lot of things on the internet, a lot of things on social media. We're all guilty of it at some point in our lives of posting things, and often those are photos. So I know I've heard, better than us, a lot of these photos are taken from social media posts of all ages, adults, family members, children, kind of, because again, we're in a world that happens a lot, as we know. Where is that coming from, right? Is it social media? Is it other places they're getting this information for these AI video deepfake occurrences?
Yeah. So a lot of times they're scrubbing what's available online. So if LinkedIn is a perfect example. Many people have a public LinkedIn, which means all of that data is being scrubbed, where you've worked, your photos, your posts. So that's why it knows so much about you. And then it's using that to train its model. For social media, especially if you have a public profile versus a private profile, they're using that. They can have all your photos, how you communicate, your style of communication, who your friends are, all of that stuff. You've given them in a box with a bow and you're handing it over, whether you know it or not. And they're not going to your profile specifically. They've created a script where they're able to just scrub and scrape all that data and then build that into their model and then start using it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That's a really good segue into cyber safety best practices. And the first one is to just browse safely. We all have devices. You might be in a place where your service is not the best. You might be working remotely from a coffee shop and you think, I need to connect to the internet. So how do we get on and access the internet but use it safely and securely? So I'm going to connect or talk about the good, better, and best practices. The good would be public Wi-Fi. Use it responsibly and with caution, because you have to really treat that like somebody is looking over your shoulder. If I go to Starbucks right now, which I did this morning, if I connect to Starbucks Wi-Fi, I have to assume every single thing I type could be intercepted. And if you are looking at your financial accounts, work information, even heck, personal information, you might not want to have that transmitted. So you really want us to stick to watching a couple of videos, the weather, things like that on public Wi-Fi. Now, the better practice in this scenario, if I ever work remotely, instead of jumping on the Wi-Fi, what I end up doing is using my mobile data or hotspot. It's a really good way to have, especially if I'm using, because it's going through my internet service provider or my provider. So the Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, those sort of, depending on your provider. And then you're using that instead of the public Wi-Fi. So that is the better practice. But really, you should be using what's called a virtual private network. And this encrypts all of the data from start to finish. So when you type in wellsfargo.com to check your bank account, when you put in your username and password, when you click on each of accounts, all of that is encrypted. Now, let's say you have a scenario where you're on public Wi-Fi, well, then turn on your VPN. So if that's, if mobile hotspot isn't something that you can do, if you're going to get on public Wi-Fi, make sure you're using a virtual private network. I think most of us, if you're in a business that requires or may has an intranet, they do require you to use a VPN from business perspective, but that's also something you should consider on a personal part as well. Now this is not all inclusive, but if you're looking for a VPN, it all depends on your price point, how many devices you want to connect. And I will say your devices do have a built-in feature. Like my Mac has a built-in feature. I can just turn it on and off. And so that's also an option for you as well, or you can do these standalone options that are specifically for VPN only. You also want to make sure you're turning off auto connection functions. So let's say I do connect to the Starbucks Wi-Fi. That means if I have my auto connection functions on, my phone will be looking for Starbucks Wi-Fi. It'll be probing for that same Wi-Fi over and over and over again. That's why when we get into our home, our phone automatically connects to our home network. When we go to work, it automatically connects because it's constantly probing for these known networks. Well, if I connect to a public Wi-Fi network access point, Starbucks, that means I could be at a stoplight and a Starbucks is right there, and my phone could be connecting to the Wi-Fi because it's a known network. And so what I do is ask to join networks. If you don't want to just automatically just join. Yes, your phone will still connect to your home Wi-Fi and your known networks, but you don't want to just automatically just join random networks just because they have the same name of something that you used to connect to. Because there's people that could sit outside of your house, sniff what your Wi-Fi network is. Mine happens to be, I think I'm funny, no more Mr. Wi-Fi. And they could pretend to be no more Mr. Wi-Fi. And then all of a sudden I'm somewhere else and they have me just automatically join just because it's the same name. You don't want that. So you can actually turn that off. Also, you want to turn off your Bluetooth too. If you're not in range of anything that you're using Bluetooth for, turn it off. There's no reason why you need to have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on because it's just constantly probing, looking for known access points and known connections that they've made in the past. Here's our password manager tip, and I will include a password manager. This is not an all-inclusive list, but it's a good place to start. But this is one password you have to remember, and it's going to keep and store all of those notes that you made. So whether it's any, you've made verbal passcodes, you've made any of these notes, all of that's going to be encrypted instead of trying to remember all of them or keeping them in an unsecure location like a note in your phone or in a contact is usually what a lot of people do. And so by using a password manager, it does make it so you can store these complex sorts of passwords, but in a safer way. And then we have multi-factor authentication. Okay, so imagine this. In a breach, you have something that you know, which is your username and password. Well, now you have to have something then that you have. You have to have a next layer of authentication. All right, I have something I know, which is my username and password. Okay, if that information is breached, anybody with that username and password could essentially just get into my account. You do not want that because you do not have control over what information it could potentially be breached. The companies that you do business with, you trust, but they could have a cyber incident. So enabling two-factor authentication makes it so if somebody does get your password, then at least you have an extra layer of authentication in that you're able then to get to prove that it's you. So what I'm going to do is this, because not all multi-factor authentication codes are treated equally when it comes to security level. So we're going to take a look at the different MFA methods from the least to most secure. So the first one is SMS. We're probably familiar with this. These SMS-based codes, it's better than no MFA. So you'll get the code, you find it, you put it in the website, it's great. But if somebody were to take over your device, it makes it so malicious actors could get in. This is better than nothing, but there are better ways. So a more secure would be email-based codes. So they are unique. They're also time sensitive. So if these codes are going to be compromised, that means it would require somebody compromising your email account. So a better way is getting these email-based authentication. And then next option would be a authenticator app. You can use Google, there's Microsoft, there's other authenticator apps. You set this up, which is really cool, but it generates a time-based code locally, which means I have to have my device with me in order to even get in. This morning, my phone was downstairs. I left it downstairs, and then I was trying to log into my PayPal account, and it said, "Oh, you need your authentication code." So I'm looking around, I use my watch to find my phone and I hear it downstairs. And so I had to run and get my phone, get my code. Is it super convenient? No, but we don't want it convenient because that means it's convenient for the fraudsters as well. Or you can use what's called a hardware key, and that security key makes it as an extra authentication. There's some options there for you. Then we want to really encourage you to update your operating system. Doing this automatically is super important. I'll give you an example. So just a few days ago, this screenshot I took this morning of reasons why we need to update our operating system. This is just a snapshot of the different news media it's urgent that you update your operating system if you're an Apple user. So I have mine set to automatically update, but if you don't, you have to physically go in and check. So just turning them on to automatically update is certainly going to help make your device more secure and fix those patches and those known vulnerabilities. We also have to review our location services. So in your app, you are giving away your location. So let me give you an example. There's your phone location in your Peloton app, just different apps that you use. You're giving away personal information. So you actually have to go into these apps and turn it off to private because a lot of them are set to be public accounts and you have to go in and change that. I used the Venmo example, and Sarah, Mark, and I met yesterday, and we were just talking about how if you go on your Venmo or these peer-to-peer cash apps, it is really fascinating. You can learn about somebody really quick about who they're paying and how they're paying and what they do. And so we have to make sure that these sort of transactions, even though it may just seem, oh, what's the big deal? I'm paying my friends back for pizza or groceries. If you're putting things that are inappropriate in their description or inappropriate emojis, that if you are a recruiter and you're looking for a new job, or maybe you're a position at work, they're actually looking at now peer-to-peer apps to verify whether or not, or maybe you're in school and you're getting a scholarship or going to college or a different program. They're looking at peer-to-peer apps now to trust whether or not you're a good person or look at your information. Now I realize we are butting up on time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the resource section of the presentation. And Mark, I'll share these best practice slides. So if we want to post these later, then they have the information. But I will click on the resources because I think it's really important to know, hey, what do I do if I'm a victim? The one thing you should go, it's usa.gov. And this is going to say where to report scams because there's FBI, there's the Federal Trade Commission, there's local law enforcement. There's so many different agencies that are meant to help. but they're really good at one specific thing. So if you go to USA.gov, where to report scams, you answer a few questions about your compromise, and it's going to say, okay, report this to the Federal Trade Commission. Oh, this is internet-based, report this to IC3.gov. So it's a really good place to know that you're sharing this with the correct authority instead of wasting your time with maybe an authority that won't be able to help you with your case. And of course, reporting it to local law enforcement is always super helpful for them to be able to get a pulse on what sort of scams are happening in the area and if they can make that connection. And then if you have kids, I know what I do, we all, Sarah, Mark, you do, having a talk about them, about using their device safely is super important. I recommend a conversation like the smarttalk.org. It produces a contract, you have a conversation with your kid, and then you're able to at least have the conversation versus do this, do that, not because I said so, and so on. I want to thank you so much. I put my information there. If you want more tips like this, I do have a YouTube page on cyber. You can follow me there. My information is there, and I'd love to connect with anybody that has questions or wants to talk offline.
This
Thanks.
was so incredible and invaluable. I really appreciate your time and helping us, educate us. I feel like as much as I felt like I knew, I didn't, and I learned a lot from this.
My pleasure.
This is great, Paige. I did have a question that came up yesterday to wrap up, and then we'll let everyone go.
Yeah.
It's a bigger conversation, but because it's cyber related, a client asked me yesterday in a conversation I said I'd ask today. Because all this is cyber, it's risk, all things, what are your thoughts on cyber liability insurance? If you have any, like 2-minute quick notes on it, and then obviously then we'll let everyone depart for their day.
From a business perspective or a personal perspective?
Both.
So business, it's absolutely needed. However, you have to make sure that you're following the points that there's going to be evidence that you have to prove that you're doing the controls necessary in order to get your claim, if you have a claim. And so if it's going to require you to have multi-factor authentication. It's going to require all these things. And if you don't have that in place and you submit a claim because you have a cyber incident, you're likely not going to be reimbursed. So before you invest, you have to make sure you have it's clear what is needed to make sure you have an order. And that's something that we deal with on a daily because they're trying to get all of those, the framework of that in place. And from a personal level, same thing. Whatever the requirements are, you make sure that you have all of that in place and documented, and it will help in the event of a cyber incident.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for that. Thank you again, Paige, and thank you for everyone for attending. Obviously, a lot of meat and information here, which is really important to know. We'll have some follow-up with all of you who attended and couldn't attend, and we look forward to having Paige again back for another discussion.
Okay, looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.